What if the real enemy isn't failure, but comfort? Imagine for a moment that the greatest threat to your dreams isn't the competition, or even your own mistakes, it's the quiet, creeping sense that you've already done enough. This isn't just a problem for the lazy or the unmotivated. In fact, history shows us that the most dangerous moment for any achiever comes right after a victory. Think about the stories we hear in American history. After the Revolutionary War, the United States had won its freedom, but the real struggle was just beginning. The Founding Fathers could have rested, satisfied with their triumph over the British. Instead, they faced a new, silent enemy: complacency. The temptation to relax, to assume the hardest part was over, nearly tore the young nation apart. The Articles of Confederation were weak, states argued, and the country teetered on the edge of collapse. Only by recognizing this hidden danger and acting decisively, drafting the Constitution, building new systems, did America survive and thrive. But this isn't just a story from the past. It's a pattern that repeats itself everywhere. From the boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies to the quiet corners of your own life. The moment you achieve something big, the moment you finally make it, that's when you're most at risk, not from outside threats, but from the slow, invisible decay that comes from letting your guard down. There's a word for this in ancient samurai culture, a word that describes the silent force that destroys more dreams than any enemy ever could. It's not a dramatic fall or a sudden defeat. It's the slow, almost unnoticeable slide into comfort, the belief that you've already arrived. And if you're not careful, it can undo everything you've worked for just when you think you're safe. So, what is this hidden enemy? And how did the greatest warriors in history learn to fight it? The answer might just change the way you see your own victories and your own future. There's a reason why the most successful people and nations often face their greatest downfall, not at the hands of their rivals, but from within. In the world of the samurai, this silent enemy had a name: Udan. It wasn't a foe you could see on the battlefield. It didn't announce itself with a clash of swords or a declaration of war. Udan was the slow leak of vigilance, the gradual dulling of the edge that once made you sharp. It was the oil slipping through your fingers, the discipline that quietly faded away while you were busy celebrating your last victory. But you don't have to look to feudal Japan to see Udan at work. American history is filled with moments where this invisible threat nearly changed the course of the nation. After World War II, the United States emerged as a global superpower. The economy was booming, the country was united, and the future seemed unstoppable. But beneath the surface, a different kind of danger was brewing. The sense of security led to a period of complacency. The warning signs were their rising tensions abroad, social unrest at home, and a growing gap between the promise of the American dream and the reality for many citizens. It was during this time that the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite into space. The shock was immediate and profound. How could America, the land of innovation and progress, have been caught off guard? The answer was simple: Udan. The nation had grown comfortable, assuming its lead was unassailable. The wake-up call was harsh, but it forced a new era of action, leading to the creation of NASA, a renewed focus on education, and a race to the moon that would redefine what was possible. Udan doesn't attack the weak or the unprepared. It targets those who have already achieved something, those who have tasted success and let their guard down. It whispers in your ear, telling you that you've done enough, that you can afford to coast. It's the voice that says, take it easy, you've earned it. Even as your edge begins to dull. In the workplace, it's the executive who stops learning after a big promotion. In sports, it's the champion who skips practice because they're already at the top. In everyday life, it's the student who slacks off after getting into their dream college, or the entrepreneur who stops innovating after their first big win. The danger of Udan is that it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels reasonable, even deserved. But that's exactly why it's so deadly. It's the slow erosion of discipline, the gradual loss of hunger, the invisible enemy that waits for you to relax. And by the time you notice, it's often too late. So how do you recognize Udan before it takes hold? And more importantly, how do you fight back? The answer lies in understanding the stories of those who faced it and what they did next. Because the battle against Udan isn't just a lesson from the past. It's a challenge that every achiever, every nation, and every one of us must face again and again. Every story of greatness begins with a spark, a moment when someone decides that ordinary isn't enough. For Teeshi, That moment came at the age of 12 when he watched a samurai move with a kind of purpose and discipline he'd never seen before. It wasn't a grand battle or a heroic act that inspired him. It was the quiet confidence, the way every gesture seemed to carry the weight of years of training. In that instant, Teeshi made a promise to himself he would become a samurai no matter what it took. This kind of determination isn't unique to ancient Japan. In American history, we see echoes of Teeshi's journey in the lives of those who refused to accept the status quo. Take, for example, the story of Abraham Lincoln. Born into poverty, Lincoln's early life was marked by hardship and loss. But instead of letting his circumstances define him, he became obsessed with self-improvement. He read by candlelight, taught himself law, and practiced public speaking until his voice carried the conviction of a leader. Like Teeshi, Lincoln's rise wasn't fueled by talent alone, it was built on relentless effort, sacrifice, and a vision that stretched far beyond his humble beginnings. For Teeshi, the path to mastery was brutal. He woke before dawn, trained until his hands bled, and studied the strategies of legendary warriors while others rested. Every day was a test of willpower, a battle against comfort and distraction. When he was finally accepted into Master Yamada's sword school at 15, a place where only 5 students were chosen each generation, it was more than an honor. It was proof that his sacrifices had meaning, but the real challenge was just beginning. The training at Yamada's school was relentless. Imagine waking up at 4 in the morning, meditating in the freezing cold, and fighting until your body collapsed from exhaustion. Yet, Teeshi endured. He wasn't just chasing a title, he was chasing a dream that went beyond the sword. He wanted to become a strategist, a leader whose wisdom could shape the fate of armies and nations. This hunger for something greater is what separates those who achieve from those who merely wish. In the United States, the same spirit drove the early pioneers who crossed the continent, risking everything for a chance at a better life. It's the same drive that pushed inventors like Thomas Edison to keep experimenting after 1,000 failures, or athletes like Jackie Robinson to break barriers that seemed unbreakable. When Teeshi finally graduated at 18, the ceremony was simple but profound. Master Yamada handed him the twin swords, the kata, and the wakizashi, symbols of the samurai's honor and responsibility. "You have earned the right to wield these blades," the master said, "but remember, the real battle begins now. The battle against yourself." It's a lesson that echoes through every story of American achievement. Reaching the summit is only the beginning. The true test is what you do after you arrive. For Teeshi, as for so many before him, the journey from ambition to accomplishment was marked by discipline, sacrifice, and an unbreakable will. But as history shows us, the moment you think you've made it is often the moment you're most vulnerable. The next chapter of Teeshi's story, and of every achiever's story, would reveal just how dangerous that moment can be. Success has a strange way of changing people. The very hunger that drives someone to greatness can quietly fade once the goal is reached. For Teeshi, the transformation was so subtle he barely noticed it happening. In the months after his graduation, he kept up his routines, waking early, training, studying, but the intensity was gone. The fire that once burned in his chest was replaced by a quiet sense of satisfaction. He had a salary now, a respected title, and the admiration of his peers. People called him Samurai Teeshi. He had made it, or so he thought. This is the oldest trap in the book. The belief that achievement is the finish line, not just another starting point. It's a pattern that repeats itself throughout history, especially in the United States. After the Civil War, America entered a period known as the Gilded Age. The country had survived its greatest internal conflict, and the future seemed bright. Industry boomed, fortunes were made overnight, and the nation's leaders basked in the glow of victory. But beneath the surface, cracks began to form. Corruption spread, inequality grew, and the very foundations of democracy were threatened by complacency and greed. The sense of "we've made it" blinded many to the dangers lurking ahead. Teeshi's own complacency crept in quietly. At first, it was just a day off from extra training. "I'll practice tomorrow," he told himself. "I deserve a break." But one day became a week, and a week became a month. He still showed up for the required group session, but the extra effort, the late-night study, the solo drills, the constant push to improve faded away. He convinced himself that he'd earned the right to relax. that he could coast on his past achievements. This is how Udan, the silent enemy, works. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't look like laziness. It looks like reasonable self-care. You've done enough, it says, you've proven yourself. But the truth is, the world doesn't stop moving just because you do. In American history, the dangers of this mindset are clear. After the moon landing in 1969, the United States stood at the pinnacle of technological achievement. But in the years that followed, the space program lost momentum. Budgets were cut, public interest waned, and the drive that had put a man on the moon faded into the background. The sense of arrival led to a period of stagnation, and it took decades to reignite the spirit of exploration. For Teeshi, the consequences of his complacency were about to become painfully real. 6 months after his graduation, he was assigned to his first real mission: protect the right flank during an ambush against a group of bandits. It was a task he'd practiced hundreds of times. But when the moment came, his body moved with the weight of 6 months of neglect. His reactions were slow, his mind clouded by doubt. By the time he regained his focus, it was too late. One of his comrades had fallen, and the cost of his complacency was paid in blood. The lesson is as old as time. Achievement is not a destination, but a doorway. The moment you stop striving, the moment you let your guard down, is the moment you invite Udan into your life. Whether you're a samurai in feudal Japan or a leader in modern America, the trap of achievement is always waiting. The real question is, will you recognize it before it's too late? The true cost of negligence is rarely paid in a single moment. It builds quietly, day by day, until the bill comes due. And when it does, the price is almost always higher than anyone expects. For Teeshi, the consequences of letting his guard down became painfully clear on that fateful mission. The ambush was supposed to be routine, a simple test of skills he'd mastered years before. But as the bandits broke through the right flank, Teeshi's body hesitated. His movements were sluggish, his instincts dulled by months of comfort. In those few seconds of uncertainty, disaster struck. By the time he regained control, one of his fellow samurai, Kenji, had already fallen. The forest echoed with Kenji's final cry, and then just silence. The walk back to the dojo was heavy with unspoken blame. No one needed to say a word. Teeshi could feel the disappointment in every glance. He had let down not just himself, but his entire team. When they arrived, Master Yamada was waiting. The old teacher didn't shout or punish. Instead, he led Teeshi to the Zen garden and asked him to explain what happened. Teeshi confessed every detail, every mistake, expecting anger or expulsion. But what he received was something far more powerful, a lesson about the true nature of negligence. Master Yamada picked up a rusted sword and a sharpening stone. This blade was once magnificent, he said, but its owner stopped caring for it. He thought it was sharp enough, strong enough. Now it's just a piece of iron, useless, even dangerous. The message was clear: neglect doesn't destroy overnight. It erodes slowly and silently until what was once powerful becomes a liability. This lesson isn't unique to the world of the samurai. American history is filled with moments where the price of negligence was paid in full. Consider the events leading up to the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. Despite warnings and signs of rising tensions in the Pacific, a sense of security and routine dulled the vigilance of military leaders. The result was a devastating surprise attack that changed the course of World War II. The cost of that complacency was measured in lives lost, and a nation forced into a conflict it had hoped to avoid. Negligence doesn't always announce itself with catastrophe. Sometimes it's the slow decline of a once great company that fails to innovate, like Kodak or Blockbuster, both of which ignored the changing tides of technology until it was too late. Sometimes it's the erosion of trust in a leader who stops listening, stops learning, and assumes past victories will carry them forward. In every case, the pattern is the same. The moment you stop sharpening your blade, whether it's your skills, your discipline, or your awareness, you begin to lose your edge. For Teeshi, the loss of Kenji was a wound that cut deeper than any sword. It was a reminder that the real enemy isn't always out there waiting to attack. Sometimes the greatest threat comes from within, from the quiet voice that says you've done enough, that you can afford to relax. The price of negligence is paid not just in missed opportunities, but in the lives and dreams that depend on your vigilance. As Master Yamada told Teeshi, you earned the title of samurai, but you treated it as destiny, not responsibility. Udan has a price, and now you know what it is. The lesson is as relevant today as it was centuries ago. The cost of letting your guard down is always higher than you think. And sometimes, you only realize it when it's too late to make it right. Vigilance isn't just a habit. It's a philosophy, a way of life that separates those who endure from those who fade away. In the quiet of the Zen garden, Master Yamada explained to Teeshi what so many before him had learned the hard way. Udan, the slumbering of vigilance, is not simply laziness. It's a far more dangerous force, one that creeps in when you least expect it, especially after you've achieved something worth celebrating. To make his point, the master drew a perfect circle in the sand. This is your discipline, he said. When you're striving for something, your focus is complete. But the moment you achieve it, cracks begin to form, tiny, invisible at first, but growing with every day you let your guard down. With a single motion, he erased the circle, leaving only empty sand. That's how quickly vigilance can disappear. This lesson echoes through American history, where the philosophy of vigilance has often meant the difference between survival and disaster. After the American Revolution, the new nation faced a crossroads. The war was won, but the peace was fragile. The Articles of Confederation, America's first attempt at government, were weak and ineffective. States quarreled, the economy faltered, and foreign powers watched, waiting for the young country to collapse under its own weight. It was only through a renewed commitment to vigilance, a willingness to confront hard truths and take decisive action, that the Founding Fathers gathered in Philadelphia to draft the Constitution. They understood that freedom, once won, could be lost just as easily if they became complacent. Master Yamada's words to Teeshi carried the same warning. Victory is the moment of greatest danger. That's when you relax, when you think you already know enough, when you stop training as if your life depends on it. In the United States, this principle has shaped everything from military strategy to business innovation. During the Cold War, the threat of complacency was ever present. The launch of Sputnik by the Soviet Union was a wake-up call that forced America to double down on science, technology, and education. The result was not just a race to the moon, but a culture of constant improvement, a refusal to let past victories breed present failures. But vigilance isn't just about responding to threats. It's about building habits and systems that make excellence automatic. In the business world, companies like IBM and General Electric thrived for decades because they never stopped adapting, never assumed yesterday's success would guarantee tomorrow's survival. The moment they did, new competitors emerged, and the cycle repeated. For Teeshi, the philosophy of vigilance meant more than just returning to his old routine. It required a fundamental shift in mindset, a recognition that the journey never truly ends. The bare minimum might keep you where you are, but it will never take you where you want to go. As Master Yamada put it, how can you lead others if you can't lead yourself? How can you earn trust if you've broken the trust you had in your own discipline? This is the heart of the samurai code, and it's a lesson that resonates far beyond the dojo. Whether you're building a nation, leading a company, or simply trying to become the best version of yourself, vigilance is the shield that protects your achievements. It's the daily decision to keep sharpening your blade, to keep learning, to keep pushing forward, even when it would be easier to rest. In the end, the philosophy of vigilance is about respect. Respect for the journey, for the people who depend on you, and for the person you're still becoming. It's a commitment to never let Udan take root, no matter how much you've already accomplished. Because the moment you stop being vigilant is the moment you start losing everything you've worked so hard to build. If Udan is the silent enemy that erodes greatness, then Ketudan is its antidote, a force that slices through hesitation and transforms intention into action. In the world of the samurai, Ketudan wasn't just a word, it was a way of life. It meant making decisions with clarity and acting without delay, even when doubt tried to creep in. Master Yamada explained to Teeshi that the kanji for Ketudan literally means to cut, and to judge, to sever the ties of indecision and move forward with purpose. This philosophy isn't just ancient wisdom, it's a principle that has shaped some of the most pivotal moments in American history. Consider the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. The world stood on the brink of nuclear war, and the pressure on President John F. Kennedy was unimaginable. Every hour brought new intelligence, new risks, and new fears. But in the face of overwhelming uncertainty, Kennedy and his advisors had to make decisions fast, clear, and without the luxury of endless debate. The ability to act decisively, to cut through the fog of doubt, is what ultimately steered the nation away from disaster. Ketudan, in this sense, is not just about courage. It's about the discipline to act when action is needed most. Master Yamada illustrated this for Teeshi with a story from the samurai era. He spoke of Yoshimura, a young warrior who had trained his entire life for a single moment of battle. When the time came, Yoshimura hesitated just for 3 seconds. In that brief pause, his lord was struck down, and Yoshimura spent the rest of his life haunted by the knowledge that it wasn't a lack of skill that doomed him, but a lack of Ketudan. The lesson was clear: between knowing and doing, there is a razor-thin line, and crossing it quickly can mean the difference between victory and regret. In the United States, the value of decisive action is woven into the fabric of the nation. During the D-Day invasion of World War II, General Dwight D. Eisenhower faced impossible odds and the weight of the free world on his shoulders. The weather was terrible, the risks enormous, and the consequences of failure unthinkable. Yet, Eisenhower made the call to proceed, understanding that hesitation could cost thousands of lives and the future of Europe. That single act of Ketudan, of cutting through uncertainty and acting with resolve, changed the course of history. But Ketudan isn't reserved for moments of crisis or war. It's just as vital in everyday life. It's the student who decides to start studying instead of procrastinating, the entrepreneur who launches a new idea instead of waiting for the perfect time, the parent who has a difficult conversation instead of avoiding it. In every case, Ketudan is about closing the gap between what you know you should do and actually doing it. For Teeshi, learning about Ketudan was a turning point. He realized that planning, promising, and preparing were all just forms of delay if they weren't followed by immediate action. Master Yamada's words echoed in his mind. The difference between a living samurai, a dead one, isn't how much they know, it's how quickly they move from knowing to doing. This is a lesson that resonates in every corner of American life, from the halls of government to the smallest personal decision. In the end, Ketudan is about more than just speed. It's about trusting your training, your instincts, and your commitment to act when it matters most. It's about refusing to let fear or doubt paralyze you. And it's about understanding that the world doesn't wait for those who hesitate. Whether you're facing a battlefield, a boardroom, or a crossroads in your own life, Ketudan is the blade that cuts through uncertainty and forges a path forward. The question isn't whether you'll face moments of doubt. The question is, will you let them stop you, or will you act decisively and shape your own destiny? Rebuilding after a fall is never easy. For Teeshi, the path back from negligence wasn't paved with grand gestures or sudden bursts of motivation. It was built, day by day, through small, deliberate actions, each one a conscious choice to reject complacency and embrace discipline. The first step was the hardest, facing the truth that he had let himself and others down. But as Master Yamada had taught him, the only way to defeat Udan was not with regret, but with relentless, purposeful action. Teeshi didn't wait for inspiration to strike. He didn't make promises about what he would do tomorrow. Instead, he walked straight to the dojo and began again with the basics. The same movements he had practiced 1,000 times as a student now carried new weight. Each repetition was a cut through the fog of doubt, a step away from the comfort that had nearly destroyed him. He trained long after others had left, pushing himself not out of punishment, but out of a renewed sense of responsibility. This approach of rebuilding through action, not intention, has deep roots in American history. After the devastation of the Great Depression, the United States didn't recover through wishful thinking or empty speeches. The New Deal, launched by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, was a series of concrete steps: public works projects, banking reforms, and social safety nets. Each policy was a brick in the foundation of recovery, a tangible act that slowly restored confidence and stability. The lesson was clear: progress is made not by waiting for the perfect moment, but by taking consistent, meaningful action, even when the future is uncertain. Teeshi understood that motivation is fleeting, but structure endures. He asked Master Yamada for a daily responsibility, cleaning the dojo before sunrise and after sunset. It was a humble task, one usually reserved for beginners, but Teeshi saw it as a way to anchor his commitment. By tying his discipline to an external obligation, he created a system that didn't depend on how he felt each morning. Rain or shine, tired or energized, he showed up. Over time, these small acts of discipline rebuilt his confidence and sharpened his skills. In the United States, this philosophy of structure over motivation is echoed in the stories of countless innovators and leaders. Thomas Edison, for example, didn't invent the light bulb in a single flash of genius. He failed thousands of times, but each failure was met with another experiment, another adjustment, another day in the lab. His success was the result of a process, a daily commitment to action, regardless of setbacks or doubts. Teeshi's journey was not a solitary one. As he rebuilt his discipline, others began to notice. One day, a fellow samurai who had witnessed his earlier failure offered to help him improve his technique. Instead of shunning Teeshi, he shared a lesson passed down from Kenji, the comrade Teeshi had lost. This act of camaraderie reminded Teeshi that rebuilding is not just about personal redemption. It's about restoring trust and strengthening the bonds that hold a community together. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. Teeshi's movements became sharper, his mind clearer, his resolve unbreakable. He learned that true discipline isn't about heroic bursts of effort, but about the quiet, consistent actions that add up over time. It's about creating habits and systems that make excellence inevitable, even on the days when motivation is nowhere to be found. In American history, the most enduring achievements have always been built this way. Whether it's the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, the Civil Rights Movement, or the rise of Silicon Valley, progress has come from individuals and groups who refused to let setbacks define them. They rebuilt, step by step, through action, not just intention. For Teeshi, the lesson was clear: the road back from failure is open to anyone willing to walk it one deliberate step at a time. And in that journey, the act of rebuilding becomes its own kind of victory, a testament to the power of action over hesitation and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Transformation is never a single moment. It's a series of choices, each one building on the last, until the person you were is almost unrecognizable compared to the person you've become. For Teeshi, redemption didn't come with a dramatic victory or a public declaration. It came quietly through the steady rhythm of daily discipline, the humility to learn from others, and the courage to face the same challenge that had once brought him to his lowest point. Months after recommitting himself to the path of the samurai, Teeshi was given another chance. The mission was eerily similar to the one that had ended in tragedy: protect the right flank during an ambush. But this time, something fundamental had changed. It wasn't just his technique, though, that had improved. It was the absence of hesitation, the clarity of mind that comes from countless hours of preparation, and the hard-won wisdom that only failure can teach. When the bandits attacked, Teeshi's body moved without conscious thought. There was no second-guessing, no internal debate. His actions were swift, precise, and effective. Every samurai returned alive. This kind of transformation is echoed throughout American history. After the failures and setbacks of the early space program, the United States faced a defining moment with the Apollo 13 mission. When disaster struck and the spacecraft was crippled, it was not luck that brought the astronauts home. It was the relentless training, the lessons learned from past mistakes, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. The nation watched as NASA's engineers and astronauts worked together, drawing on every ounce of experience and discipline to turn near-certain tragedy into a story of survival and ingenuity. The redemption of Apollo 13 wasn't just about fixing a broken spacecraft. It was about proving that failure could be transformed into triumph through preparation, teamwork, and the refusal to give up. For Teeshi, the journey didn't end with personal redemption. His dream had always been to become more than just a skilled warrior. He wanted to be a strategist, a leader whose insight could shape the fate of many. That opportunity came during a tense negotiation between rival clans. Teeshi noticed a subtle opportunity for peace that others had missed. He could have stayed silent, deferring to those with more experience. But Ketudan, the philosophy of decisive action, had become part of him. He spoke up, presenting his analysis and proposing an alliance. To everyone's surprise, his idea was accepted and a bloody conflict was avoided. Hundreds of lives were saved, not by the sword, but by the courage to act on knowledge. This leap from individual mastery to leadership is a theme that runs deep in the American story. After the civil rights movement's early struggles, leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and countless unsung heroes transformed personal conviction into collective action. They didn't just seek their own redemption, they worked to redeem a nation, turning pain and injustice into a movement that changed the course of history. Their transformation was not just about overcoming personal obstacles, but about using their hard-earned wisdom to lift others and create lasting change. Teeshi's story, like so many in American history, shows that true redemption is never just about erasing past mistakes. It's about using those mistakes as fuel for growth, about turning pain into purpose and failure into a foundation for something greater. It's about stepping up when it matters most, not just for yourself, but for those who depend on you. In the end, transformation and redemption are not destinations, they are ongoing journeys. They require vigilance, humility, and the willingness to act again and again, even when the path is uncertain. Whether on the battlefield, in the halls of government, or in the quiet moments of everyday life, the power to change is always within reach. The only question is whether you'll seize it when the moment comes. Now, the story of Teeshi isn't just a tale from a distant era or a lesson for warriors alone. It's a mirror held up to each of us, a challenge that echoes through time and across continents. You don't have to be a samurai to face your own version of the right flank, your own moment where vigilance slips and comfort whispers that you've done enough. In fact, the real test of Ketudan, the power to act without hesitation, shows up in the most ordinary moments of modern life. Think about the projects you've started but never finished, the conversations you know you need to have but keep putting off, the habits you promised yourself you'd change tomorrow. These are your flanks. They're the places in your life where Udan, the silent enemy of complacency, waits for you to let your guard down. And just like Teeshi, the cost of inaction isn't always immediate or obvious. Sometimes it's the slow erosion of your confidence, the missed opportunities that quietly pile up, or the relationships that drift apart because you waited for the right time that never came. American history is filled with moments when the nation faced its own flanks, times when the easy path was to wait, to hope, to delay. During the early days of the civil rights movement, it would have been simple for ordinary citizens to say, someone else will speak up, someone else will march. But history remembers those who acted, who refused to let hesitation define their legacy. Rosa Parks didn't wait for a more convenient day to take her stand on that Montgomery bus. The students who staged sit-ins at lunch counters didn't wait for permission or perfect conditions. They acted, and in doing so, they changed the course of a nation. The same principle applies in every field. In business, the companies that survive and thrive are the ones that innovate before they're forced to. Apple didn't wait for the world to demand a smartphone, they created one. In science, breakthroughs come not from endless planning, but from the courage to experiment, to risk failure, and to learn by doing. The Apollo program didn't wait for every detail to be perfect before launching. It was the willingness to act, to adapt, and to keep moving forward that put a man on the moon. So what about you? Where is Udan lurking in your life? Is it in the job you've outgrown but are afraid to leave? The health goal you keep postponing? The creative project gathering dust in the back of your mind? The truth is, the world doesn't reward those who know what to do, it rewards those who do what they know. The difference between who you are and who you could become isn't some distant, magical transformation. It's the next decision you make, the next action you take, the next hour you choose to move forward instead of standing still. Ketudan isn't about waiting for motivation or the perfect moment. It's about bridging the gap between intention and action so quickly that hesitation never has a chance to take root. It's about making the call, sending the email, starting the workout, or having the conversation right now, not tomorrow. Because every time you act, you strengthen the muscle of decisiveness. And every time you wait, you give Udan a little more ground. The challenge is simple, but it's not easy. Identify your flank, the area where you've let your guard down, and take one concrete step today. Not a plan, not a promise in action. History, both personal and national, is written by those who move, not those who wait. The next chapter of your story is waiting to be written. The only question is, will you pick up the pen?